Hi, this is Revered Audio, and today I'm just doing answers to comments because during the past couple of weeks I haven't had much time uh, answering to comments. So here I'd like to make up for it. And Alan has asking a couple questions which are probably of interest to many of you. And he is asking here my point of view on impedance matching between all types of devices. Not sure what the underlying concept is, not sure when to worry about it. So, impedance matching is basically uh, finding the right gear between the components. So impedance matching is between devices under devices it's not just between your source, your preamp, your amplifier, your crossover to loudspeaker, and then loudspeaker to room. These are some of the major big impedance conversion meeting points, but there's also impedance conversion happening inside each device. So for example, when we look at the amplifier, there's if we look, let's say, at a single-ended tube amplifier, you have first your input tube, and then you have your driver tube, and then the power tube if it's a three-stage amplifier. And between all of these tubes and tube stages there's impedance conversion. So the output impedance of one stage has to match the input impedance to the next stage, and if they match well, it's kind of like having a car with a transmission that has the right ratio for the transmission box to provide full power or the best drive characteristics for the range of operation that's required for those devices. And of course, if we have a tube amplifier, there's the last conversion stage, and that's the output transformer. And that's the most critical because the output transformer in a power amplifier has to do a very drastic impedance conversion, and it transforms a very high output impedance to a super low output impedance. So generally like 5000 ohms, and at that gets transformed down to 8 ohms. So that's why, because it's such a radical change, that's why output transformers are so key for tube amplifier design. But there's also some companies which are employing output transformers for their amplifiers. For example, Macintosh is such a company, and that's because even for solid state amplifiers, uh, it it is more beneficial if the amplifier's output impedance is properly matched to the loudspeaker's load that it's presenting to the amplifier. And of course, there's many of you would say now that this is complete rubbish because we have now dozens and hundreds of tens of thousands of amplifiers which can drive almost any impedance loudspeaker. Sure they do, and that's because they are employing massive amounts of negative feedback, or just paralleling tons of the output devices to have the required low impedance for the output. But if you go in a way that you use a transformer to properly match the impedance of your amplifier, of your solid state amplifier, you will find that some some aspects of the uh, music can get better. And I don't want to start here a discussion on like whether those amplifiers which have output transformers in them are better in sound than others, you have heard, like for example, I'm just specifically talking about Macintosh solid state amps, and of course many of you have heard amplifiers that are solid state and better than a specific Macintosh model, but I'm also sure that you have heard dozens and dozens of solid state amplifiers which are not nearly as good as a comparable Macintosh. But what I want to point out with this thing about using an output transformer for a solid state design is that the impedance matching does have benefits, but of course what you are getting out of it depends on the application. So to really explore it, you need to fiddle around with it for yourself, and do not just look at what you can find on the market with specific topologies, because that's not the whole picture. So now going a little bit wider for the response of this question is gives me an answer to an unasked question, and basically this answer is that why am I not playing around with commercial amplifiers, and or which is my favorite commercial amplifier brand, and I would say there is none. I do see potential in commercial amplifiers. Every company has his own dream, his own sound and preferences, or her sound if the designer happens to be a lady. And however, what I have noticed is that if you really want to have that specific voicing, that specific sound that you are looking for your own system, then commercial amplifiers are just the starting point. So you either have to modify them to a great degree, or just use them as ideas, as a sketchboard, as a blueprint to come up with your own ideas to give you that perception of sound that you want for yourself. And why do I have this type of view? That's because my mentor Stu, he was the one who really put this bug in my ear, and that's because although he had his audio store and he had several brands that he was selling, but he modified all of them. So whatever you bought from Stu, none of those were stock, all of them were modified, some to a smaller degree, some to a larger degree, but enough so that if you bought a Conrad Johnson from him, it sounded very different from a stock Conrad Johnson. And I have a few stories about that, but story time is now for another day. But what I want to say with this is that impedance matching is very important, and for Alan, my brief answer is basically when the impedances are properly matched between the stages of a device, whether it's an amplifier or preamplifier or parts of the loudspeaker and your room. So when you have proper matching, then you have optimal power delivery between the devices, better bandwidth delivery, and ultimately we will have the advantage of getting more of what's coming from your recording and translating that into sound with the least amount of loss and least amount of coloration. So I hope that winding answer did answer that. And Alan's second question: have I thought about putting a Carson coupler on the compression driver? Yeah, YouTube doesn't like links, and usually if you put a link in your comment, then then YouTube automatically deletes it. I have no control over it. If there's a link in a post, I do not even see the link. It's just gone. And you are worrying, why doesn't it show up? That's because YouTube automatically filters it out. So basically, it's basically a tube a few inches in diameter attached to the front of the driver, and Carson has a slot in it. So basically, yep. So that's why it got lost, because YouTube automatically removed it, and I did not. So my answer to that, because Alan has seen it and many of you have seen it, that I'm running the compression driver bare, and it does not have anything in front of it. And basically, if we would be attaching a Carson coupler to that, that would be basically attaching a pipe, attaching a tube, and the tube has, let's see, maybe like this is the tube, and it has a slot at the end, so the sound is coming through a slot. So what that Carson coupler is doing is basically we are adding a piece of horn to the compression driver, and at the end we are narrowing it down, so the energy can come only through that slot. And we are, so for one thing, we are creating a resonant chamber, a horn effect with the length of the Carson coupler, so that's the amount of amplification that this device is going to do. And the frequency is basically centered around the diameter of the Carson coupler, so that frequency band will be overemphasized by the coupler, and then we will have a slot at the end, and that will actually focus this energy to the length of that slot. And basically what we will get is that the sound will be restricted as the lowest frequency will be defined by the mouth of this Carson coupler, and the high frequencies will be defined by the width of that Carson coupler. So what is going to happen if I would do that is that it would add quite a few dB efficiency for a very narrow range of sound. And basically, if I did that, I would, let me see, just let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So right now you see that I have my compression driver sitting here on top of the loudspeaker cabinet, and if I would add the Carson coupler, it's literally something like adding, now imagine that this is not a clarinet, but it won't stay there, so imagine that I put it there, but this is like a straight thing, or even it can be widening out, but at the end it has just a slot to it. So in that case, whatever the diameter here, that would define my low frequency response. So it would be, if it would be this size, it would be just like several kilohertz. That would be the lowest extension where this compression driver would work. And right now I'm using this compression driver down to about 500 hertz, and for that duty I need the sound as it exits, so the surface of the compression driver acts as the mouth of the horn. And when we look inside the compression driver, then you see that this is already like a Carson coupler, so we have the tube inside, so the compression driver already has inside a horn in it. So this thing, I have a horn that's about this long going from here up there, and it narrows out, widens out. So this is the mouth of the horn, and then it continues to the extent of the size of the top of the cabinet. So basically when the sound is coming from this compression driver, then this is the throat of the horn that I'm driving, and this becomes the mouth, and the mouth continues here. And you see, because there it drops back, so there is a drop in efficiency. So at the frequencies where this is dropping down, so basically below 1 kilohertz, I'm losing energy there. But then the energy is sustained down to about 300 hertz, defined by the size of the top. So basically, this way I can use this compression driver easily down to crossing it over at 500 hertz, because even though I'm crossing it at, if you cross at 500, then it's still dropping down. But if you do not have support down to, let's say, about 300 hertz where I have support at, if everything falls off at 500, then that fall will not be the one dictated by your crossover slope, but would be a much steeper slope instead, and would be much harder to couple to the woofer. So this way, with this kind of slope that I'm getting here, and also the woofer crossed over at first order, the two of these plus the front horn loading and the way this is loaded, they all match up. So the crossing between the two driver is seamless. And if I would add the Carson coupler, then in that case, basically I would have like plus maybe like 4 or 5 dBs of efficiency down to about 2 kilohertz or 3, and below that I would have a huge gap. So it means that I would need to add another one of these compression drivers to back up that region that I have lost. And also, because I have added that Carson coupler, now the efficiency is boosted so much that I need to put extra resistors to cut down that extra energy. So when is it a good idea to have a Carson coupler? Only if you want to use a much narrower region for your driver, for your compression driver, and if your compression driver is not as a big beefy beast like the 288 Altec, but something smaller, like you see nowadays, like Peerless by Timpani has those really flat ones, or other companies which are not this thick, but they are kind of like the body of the compression driver is this tiny, this narrow, maybe like an inch or inch and a half. And for those, you might want to add that extra coupler to boost the efficiency. But for this guy, this is already 113 dB efficient. I don't need any kind of coupler to make it more efficient. And also with that narrow slot on it, it would help if you fire it at you, because then you have a really good dispersion with that. And now what I'm doing is I'm firing it up. So basically I'm running it in an omnidirectional mode, and there I do not want to limit the dispersion. I want it to just go and distribute evenly across everywhere. This direction, that, there, everywhere. It goes out freely. And then I can enjoy the benefits of using it omnidirectionally. And for those of you who have not seen my previous videos, you see I have a piece of blue tack stuck in there. Maybe I can just... So it's basically like a ridge, a piece of a thingy. I could make it like more like a ridge. It's not really nice right now. But the purpose of that is to break up resonances and act like a Helmholtz resonator. And if you put that, then you take away all of those colorations that the metal chamber would do, because inside, as you see, this is all metal. This is the metal ring, metal chamber there, and the sound that comes out, it has a little metallic tinge to it. But when you add the Helmholtz resonator, all of those metallic colorations are gone. So thank you, Alan, for the question, and I hope this helps a little bit to answer about the Carson coupler. And Thank you guys for the comments, and I hope I have more time to answer in the future. But of course, if I can, I prefer to make a video answer for the comments because it's much more beneficial. So thank you, Ellen, and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.